Hello, welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're continuing on from talking about the story The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. This is a part 2, so please watch part 1 first before continuing on to this. We didn't actually finish The Stolen Earth, which I find pretty funny. I didn't end that video talking about the cliffhanger on that. So before we talk about the ending of that story, let's go back a bit and talk about each character that has gone through the episode so far, because I have things to say. Shall we start with my favourite companion of the revived series, Martha Jones? Now she gets introduced into this story as working for Project, I believe it's called Project Indigo, which we later learn is stolen technologies from the Sontarans that UNIT has repurposed to try and make teleportation technology. It's a prototype, however, and Jack from Torchwood seems to know, and when Martha is put it on, UNIT have given her the instructions that if things are very dire like they are now, with the Daleks seemingly needing the Earth for some purpose, then they can use the Hostin-Hardin key. So they give her the Hostin-Hardin key and tell her to use it if the situation calls for it. Now nobody, not even Jack, knows what the Hostin-Hardin key, only the higher-ups at UNIT, including Martha Jones. And so her plot line throughout this story is about her interactions with characters into the Hostin-Hardin key. She gets teleported, and Jack presumes that she dies because of the experimental technology, and believes that because of the wrong codes she has been atomized, but actually she survived, and she actually appears in her mother's house, having a cameo appearance from her mother for the story. Where this is where Martha Jones appears in the story in the television screen. Now her storyline is ties into the larger narrative of this adventure, which we'll talk about later on in the discussion. But I really like Martha Jones here. She sticks to what I like about her, but she's also clearly matured and seems to be a much more military fighting character. Not that she would carry weapons. She does not carry weapons. That is an important detail about her. She takes influence from the Doctor, not from UNIT. And like she says in the Sontaran experiment, Sontaran stratagem, she gets into UNIT to try and hope to make them better. So in a way, she is doing what she believes the Doctor would do, and she believes that her purpose, her role in all this is to use the Hostin-Hardin key, and believes that maybe that the Doctor wouldn't personally do it, but feels like the Doctor would if he had no choice, if he was in the exact same boat, in that same situation, which leads into the mystery of what the Hostin-Hardin key is, because that's her main plot line of the narrative. But when we later learn what it is, it ties into the larger narrative and to the Doctor's character. Very interesting and dynamic stuff. Now then we get to, let's get on to the spin-off characters first, with Sarah Jane, Luke and Mr. Smith. Sarah Jane, for episode, for Stolen Earth, I feel like it was a good thing to talk about how each characters interact with the Stolen Earth and Journey's End, because in Stolen Earth, it's basically about moving the set pieces ready for Journey's End, about all of our characters trying to get into the situations. All our characters are mainly just set to get the Doctor into the narrative, and in part 2 then it's all about characters trying to get into certain locations. And that means in terms of a character and as a plot element, Sarah Jane doesn't really have much to do, which is kind of disappointing. But like I stated in part 1, she has some phenomenal scenes in terms of what Sarah Jane, Elizabeth Sladen, can portray. As she breaks down in tears, she has these very emotional beats. One of my favourite scenes is actually in Journey's End, in which all of the characters are having this video conference with the Doctor who's been held prisoner by the Daleks, more specifically Davros. And Davros recognises Sarah Jane, and Sarah Jane is just like, you can't be. Sarah Jane, don't you remember me? And Davros is just like, yes, you were there at the very beginning of my creation. Elizabeth Sladen just absolutely nails it here. She once believed that this would be her final appearance in Doctor Who. I don't know if she knew she had cancer at the time, but she was ill for a while prior to her death in 2011, and she has stated multiple times that she thought this would be her last appearance. It wouldn't. It'd be her last big role, but she did get a cameo in The End of Time, for those of you, if anybody's curious about that. But yes, Sarah Jane, I think, gets the best emotional beats, but in terms of what she does as a character in the story, in the narrative, she isn't really getting much to do. There's a scene in which she's like, right, I've got to find the Doctor, I've got to come. Luke, Mr. Smith, stay here, and I got to go to the Doctor. I'm sorry, I got to leave you, but I got to get to him. I need him so I can help him and stop the Daleks. And she's all ready to go, ready to pump, and then, like, just around the corner, she gets stopped by Daleks who say that human transport is now illegal and she will be quickly exterminated. And actually, this is a semi-part of the cliffhanger, because the cliffhanger for Journeys, for the Stolen Earth, is like one of those multiple cliffhangers bundled together. And so it does leave for a really tense moment in which it looks like the Daleks could have exterminated Sarah Jane. And in this world, in this big event, you do feel like it could be possible that they kill Sarah Jane at this moment. But in terms of a narrative structure, she seems only to be there so that at one point later on in the story, she can give Jack a warp star, a device which I don't think was ever brought up prior to this, but that's mainly in Journey's End, where she gives the star to Jack, and they come up with this plan to destroy the Crucible, which again ties into the Doctor's narrative. So now let's jump to the Torture, because they have exactly the same problem, at least with Jack. Jack has these great emotional beats, like I mentioned in part 1 of my vlog series. That scene in which he just kisses them and is just like, I'm sorry, I have nothing going to do, you're all going to die. That is just a really great moment. It seems like Jack has a lot more to do than Sarah Jane. When Journey End kicks in, the plot line of him being an immortal does play into the fact that he is there at the Doctor at one of his weakest moments, and gets killed by a Dalek, and nobody knows that he can be resurrected, apart from, of course, the Doctor. And so Jack uses this moment to basically escape from the Daleks so that he can get to find allies, which he finds in the form of Jackie Tyler and Mickey Smith. And I also want to talk about Luke, Mr. Smith, Gwen, and Yanto, because this is the first time they've ever appeared in the Doctor Who, the main series. In fact, for Gwen and Yanto, it would be their only appearance in Doctor Who, which is pretty cool. But the script really just gives them very little to do. They mainly have them stay in the same sets that they were for their original shows. Like the Torture team, except with the exception of Jack, don't leave the hub, and Luke, of course, Mr. Smith, doesn't leave Sarah Jane's attic. which does kind of feel like a waste. But I do feel like in Stolen Earth anyway, because that doesn't really happen until like the later end when Sarah Jane leaves Luke and Jack leaves the Tortured team. Do they not really have much to do? Of course, they do have the premise of trying to get this subwave network to contact the Doctor, and this leads into a fantastic cliffhanger. After the death of Harriet Jones, the Daleks have tracked the signal to the Torchwood hub, and so the Daleks have actually caught up with Torchwood and are actually at the hub, leaving Gwen and Yanto were just like, we're going to die anyway, we better go out fighting. And so they get machine guns and start blasting away as the doors open, leaving a single Dalek ready to open fire upon them. And that is actually one of the semi-cliffhangers for this story. So they are mainly those characters. Before we get into the main big two that we're going to talk about, we need to talk about Rose Tyler. For those of you who haven't been keeping track, I'm not a big fan of Rose Tyler in Series 1 and Series 2 of Doctor Who. I found her just not an interesting character, and I felt like the Russell T Davis's his huge love for this character was a very distracted element to the majority of stories to Rose, treating her as the best companion when her actions don't really justify it, and she can sometimes, but not always, I will grant you that, come off as a bit of a brat. And if some of you might recall in my video talking about Turn Left, I actually found her a very horrible character. Not that, I absolutely loved her or hated her, but in terms of her interactions with Donna and her helping her trying to connect to the Doctor, I found her to likeable here. But in Stolen Earth and Journey's End, she is frustratingly arrogant and self-absorbed. When the Rose basically tracks Wilfred and Sylvia, some really great connections with the supporting cast meeting a previous companion, which is just really cool to see, leading into some really funny jokes as well, with Rose asking if their computer has a webcam, but Wilfred's just like, no, Sylvia said it and they're naughty. Great dialogue right there. And so Rose has to basically watch this subwave network which connects all of the Doctor's allies together on any sort of technology devices. Of course, they don't even know that Rose is even in on this, and there's a bit where there's a blank space and it's Rose, she thinks anyway, and she's trying to get into contact, but it turns out it's Martha Jones. And Rose's reaction to this is so frustrating. I was liking Rose again at this point. It was really cool to see her return with the gun coming through the teleport, and she's looking up at the sky and it's like, well, here we go. And she seems to be the epicenter of the story. Finally, the Doctor's going to reunite with Rose. It's a shame that she's just such an unlikable character here. She moans by the fact that Martha is the one that was this connected to the subway network. She complains, it's like, oh yeah, I was here first. I genuinely feel like the Doctor has actually made Rose a less interesting person due to his adventures after watching this story. But like I said, I like the stuff around her, but her as a character I felt was really frustrating, and it means that one of sadly the core elements of this story is something which gets really hindered because it really it really relies on your enjoyment of the character of Rose Tyler. And so they all connect with the Doctor, who talks to them all through this subway network, where Davros actually comes in and gets through the signal to talk to the Doctor. I really like the bit where I kind of have mixed feelings on the Doctor's reaction to Davros's return. He's clearly in shock and in awe by the fact that this person he knows has died has returned and back alive, and there's this really powerful moment for a part where the Doctor's just like, after all this time, after everything we've been through, there's only one thing I want to say to you. Bye! That bye, I felt like David Tennant might have played that a bit too much of him enjoying it, because it makes Davros feel much less of a threat here. Although, of course, the scene is played up for laughs mainly. You're expecting the Doctor to be this like, oh my god, how are you alive and stuff, which he kind of does. But yet he just has this kind of, bye, get away, I'm coming back to Earth. And so the Doctor lands on Earth, which has been split milliseconds out of real time, and that's how they couldn't find Earth earlier. And they find all the other planets and they transport the TARDIS onto Earth, and they look around this abandoned road where he asks Donna, like, what did you see? What did you want? And what did Rose want? And it's here where we get the moment where all the fanboys have been waiting for, and fangirls as well, where the Doctor and Rose finally reunite and they run to each other in the road, waiting for that embrace, that massive hug, where all of a sudden a Dalek comes through another corner of the road and exterminates the Doctor. 40 plus years. One Dalek finally got a shot on the Doctor. It took him so long. I love the Daleks in this. Not only did they get a shot on the Doctor, but they also had part of their plan be, let's get the Doctor not involved with us as much as possible. These are clearly some of the smartest Daleks that we've ever seen. But of course, I think it was Jack that destroys that Dalek, and this leads into the big cliffhanger, the main cliffhanger of Stolen Earth, in which the Doctor, David Tennant, at the middle part of this story, starts to regenerate. That, looking back, it is kind of a bummer that it does get copped out, of course, in the end, because we now know that David Tennant leaves at the end of time, and so, of course, he's not going to regenerate here. But it is important to know that David Tennant did announce that he was leaving prior to this story, and though he did mention he was going to be in the Christmas special and blah-de-blah-de-blah, there was a chance, a week, because we didn't see any clips from Journey End, where it looked like the Doctor could regenerate. And this was a massive talking point for people. And it was one of the reasons why Journey's End is one of the most highly viewed stories of all time, because it was such a big talking point. And people were so looking forward to seeing how that cliffhanger would be resolved. And I will admit, rewatching it, I did get into the hype mind. It's like, oh my god, to seeing that. It was the first time really that we had a sort of surprise regeneration in that kind of sense, where it was like in the middle part, I was like, that was the regeneration is the cliffhanger. If you don't count the War Games Part 10 cliffhanger as like thing, because I don't know. But yeah, that was a very big discussion. And so with that, we finished Stolen Earth, which I personally believe is easily the best part of this story, because Journey's End, as I talked about in my previous video, I think is where a lot of issues, a lot of problems arrive in this story. So it turns out that the hand that the Doctor had his hand cut off at the end of A Christmas Invasion, David Tennant's first story, in which Jack had kept throughout all of Series 1 of Torchwood, and then was given to him, given back to the Doctor in Series 3's finale, Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords. And so the Doctor had that hand, and there's this explanation where the Doctor was able to heal himself, but he didn't need the change, so he just put that excess regeneration energy into the hand, which right off the bat is something which I am not a fan of, because it kind of breaks the old rule of regeneration, that they don't have control of it. Because if the Doctor could do this, could have kept his own personality, his own trait, why does he do this more often? Because he needed to chop off a hand at one point? I don't know, I'm not buying it personally. And the idea that like David Tennant is just like there's this arrogance about the 10th Doctor, where it's like he doesn't want to change, he doesn't want to go, which is a precursor to his character in The End of Time, which is something which I'm not a fan of, but in here it's mainly just a plot point, just to resolve that cliffhanger. Not happy with it, not a big fan of it, but I will admit, rewatching this for the marathon, it didn't bother me as much as I originally thought it was going to. I know a lot of people don't like the resolution to the cliffhanger, but and I will admit, it is bad. It is a poorly executed resolution, but it's okay. It's okay. Come on, it works in the moment, and the Doctor's like, I didn't have to change, and so he hugs Rose and Jack and stuff, and the TARDIS gets transported by some Daleks to go to the Crucible, where the Doctor is now completely at his most vulnerable. There's an army of professionally graded Daleks created by Davros's own cell structure. There's a effect shot. I don't know if it's practical or is it like part CGI, but there's this bit where Davros basically explains these new Daleks, and he pulls his shirt off, and you could see like his inside, his rib cage and his heart, as his skin is like ripped apart as his cells were used to make a new army of Daleks. That effect is bloody amazing. That one shot is absolutely stunning and horrifying, and to think that this is in the same story with Luke and Mr. Smith and Sarah Jane with the Sarah Jane adventures, that just blows my mind. That is just so... But anyway, now Donna, she starts hearing this pulse in her head again, and starts zoning out. And because of this, she actually doesn't leave the TARDIS in time when the doors miraculously close. The Daleks state that they have no part in this, and fearing that the Doctor is using some sort of Time Lord technology weapon, decides to actually destroy the TARDIS. And the Doctor basically is like, the TARDIS has no defences. So the TARDIS is being destroyed, and this amazing effect shot where all of the glass on the round things in the 2005 designed TARDIS starts smashing, and the heartbeat in Donna's head starts thumping at the moment as she seems to be drawn to the hand, and when she touches it, the glass breaks as the hand starts burning up and forms a new man. And when this man gets up, it is the 10th Doctor. David Tennant has 2 roles in this story, where he is playing also the original 10th Doctor, and also a character which we now retroactively call the Meta-Crisis Doctor, a doctor who is separate from the main Doctor, who seems to be connected to Donna in some way. He looks like the 10th Doctor because he's played by David Tennant, but he's also half human. He only has 1 heart and seems to age like a human. He also starts talking a bit like Donna, and Donna basically has her banter moments, and to hear David Tennant basically trying to recreate her speech as the Meta-Crisis Doctor says, that's very wizard. I mean, and I love David Tennant's portrayal of the Meta-Crisis Doctor. He's a lot more veratic. He's a lot more eccentric than his Time Lord counterpart. And David Tennant here works a lot. The humour just works a lot more bombastically with Catherine Tate's Donna Noble here. But in terms of plot now, it's another thing that a lot of people aren't too keen on when it comes to this story. And again, I agree, and I don't like this element, but rewatching this story for this marathon, I didn't feel like it was such a big problem. And that is, of course, destiny. You're talking about destiny. It turns out that the whole thing about Donna being sort of connected with the timelines and she's hearing this thumping in her head turns out to be somehow like destiny calling upon her to create this Meta-Crisis Doctor, and the Meta-Crisis Doctor kind of like puts this together. It's like it was destiny. It was written in the stars that this would happen. We met you twice. I met your grandfather. Your car was outside the TARDIS. But destiny's not such thing, is it? Is it? And the Meta-Crisis Doctor's just like, the process isn't finished yet. There's still part of the cycle that needs to continue. I just realised I haven't talked about Dalek Khan. There's just so much about this story. I'm not going to talk. I don't think I will be able to finish my complete thought process by the end of this video as well, which I find pretty hilarious, if you ask me. So anyway, I just, the more you think about the story, the more other things start popping up in your head. And so the Meta-Crisis Doctor starts hiding the TARDIS away to make him quiet and safe until they can think up with something. And the Doctor basically gets captured. Jack gets captured. Not to get captured, but let me go back a bit. There's a nice reference to the original Dalek stories where they put the Doctor, Rose, and who else was in that room? I think it was just Doctor and Rose are put in these holding cells, which are just lights appearing down, but it creates some sort of a visible force field around them. Nice little callback to Daleks. And then it's here that we get like this final moment, because Dalek Khan is talking about this destiny and how the Doctor's soul will be revealed when all his children will appear and someone will die or something like that. Again, it plays into that whole criticism of this story about destiny. It was written in the stars. And a lot of people find it was very out of place for a Doctor Who story. Which it is, let's be honest, it is kind of true. But this all leads into the combination of what this story is trying to say. Because Martha Jones starts connecting after going to Germany and going into a secret unit base where she can start getting ready for the Hoston Harding key. She starts communicating to the TARDIS Crucible and talking to Davros and the Dalek supreme. And we basically learn that the Hostenhagen project was this massive structure of nuclear missiles on the Earth, and it's for a situation which got so dramatic that you need to destroy Earth, and the nukes will come in, it'll destroy Earth and destroy the entire planet, thinking that they need the Earth for something. So using this key, it will destroy humanity, kill every single human being, destroy the planet of Earth. But the universe will be safe, right? Whilst this is going on, we get a message from Jack, who's connected with Jackie and Mickey. I just realised I didn't talk about Jackie and Mickey in this story as well. There's just too much to talk about. But anyway, and Sarah Jane. This is the bit where Davros and Sarah Jane have their small interaction. But anyway, Jack basically proclaims that he has a warp star which will destroy the Crucible with everybody on it, killing the Doctor, killing Rose, killing Sarah Jane and all of them, in the hopes to destroy the entire Dalek fleet. And everybody is all banding together in a sense where they're making these massive sacrifices just to stop the Daleks. And the Doctor's soul is revealed, sort of. Now, this is another criticism that a lot of people have with this story. And in a way, I agree. However, rewatching this for the marathon and kind of putting my own spin in it in my head, I feel like maybe it's more me as a fan, and this is why this isn't a review, this is a vlog, but I've retextualized it in my head to work a lot better. Essentially, Davros's argument here, which depresses the Doctor and basically sees her at his weakest moments, is that the Doctor takes these innocent people and turns them into soldiers, into murderers. And a lot of people are like, what? I mean, fair enough, they're fighting against the Daleks and stuff. But at best, they're acting in self-defense. And it's a bit rich coming from Davros. I mean, of course, he's a megalomaniac, Hitler-inspired psycho, so his main thought process doesn't really work in any way situation, but in terms of the context of what the story's trying to tell us and how it affects the Doctor, it doesn't quite work. However, in my head, you could retextualize this story using everything that's still in the narrative. If you just kind of not change the stuff that's been said, but target certain bits of the dialogue and how Davros is portraying them, that I personally see this scene as stating that these characters, they're basically they're inspired to become the Doctor, they would sacrifice for the greater good, and sometimes that means making the hard decisions. And these characters, their first decision, the first thing they do is, right, we're going to destroy a bunch of things, killing ourselves in the process, and a bunch of people that we love in a vain hope of saving the world. Essentially, putting themselves and other people that they care about in more harm because they're trying to be like the Doctor, and the Doctor sees this. He can see how much this can damage somebody mentally, and he does, and him being friends to all of these people, he doesn't want to see anybody hurt. He doesn't want to see anybody sacrificing the Earth or sacrificing themselves just to stop the Daleks. If he had his way, it would just be him. But people will get influenced by him and start acting like him. And by that regard, they risk their lives to protect him. And this all culminates into a flashback scene in which the Doctor starts remembering characters, minor characters throughout the series, of the revived series, where characters have died in the name of the Doctor. Funnily enough, which I just couldn't help but like burst out laughing, the majority of Linda, the group from Love and Monsters, is here. And I find that extremely, extremely hilarious. But the TARDIS starts appearing into the view as the Metacrisis Doctor has created this gun, which, if shot to Davros, will send a shockwave of genetic... I just realised I haven't talked about the reality bomb. That's another issue that a lot of people have with this story. Let's talk about the reality bomb. The Davros has created this reality bomb, which they build up throughout the story as the ultimate weapon, why they need all of these planets to power this device. And essentially what it does is it cancels out the electric glue that binds atoms together, basically turning everything into dust. We get a little example of this when it kills a handful of people, but a full-on blast would continue out throughout the universe, but not only that, throughout the multiverse, leaving the Daleks and Davros the only living things in the created universe. No, the created multiverse. And it's that little detail of multiverse that a lot of people kind of pick and go, that's just really stupid. Because multiverse, as in multiple infinite amount of universes, as in if this story fails to activate the reality bomb, the next universe would be like, what if the Doctor lost and Davros won and the reality bomb is set off, and so all the universes are destroyed anyway. Can you kind of see the issue here? That particularly doesn't bother me much. It didn't really bother me at all personally. I don't have an issue with it. It's much more of like a dramatic, like, this is the ultimate, the final conclusion, the ultimate battle, the biggest scheme in Doctor Who villainly history. Sure, the ramifications, the science, the logistics of it don't work. But in terms of narrative and in terms of the enjoyment of the story, I really find it a nitpick at best, to be honest. If not, it doesn't bother me at all. But anyway, the Metacrisis Doctor has this gun which would backfire and destroy all the Daleks by having them all connected by Davros' DNA. And so he starts running to Davros, and Davros shoots him with a lightning finger, which is a lot like the Emperor from Star Wars Return of the Jedi. And he gets locked up in a holding cell, and Donna goes to pick up the gun, but then Davros hits her as well and also destroys the gun. I love the reaction the 10th Doctor has to the Metacrisis Doctor. Rose Tyler's just like, wait, there's two of you, how was that? And the Metacrisis Doctor's like, it's the Metacrisis process, the hand and stuff. And the 10th Doctor, the main Doctor, the one who's just seen like another version of him, is just like, yeah, don't worry about that. We got to stop the reality bomb somehow. He just does not care. And so it's all culminating. There's the final countdown, the ultimate conclusion. And before it gets to 1, nothing happens. And seemingly the Daleks start spinning around as Donna starts spouting out technobabble. Donna Noble, technobabble. As we learn that because of Davros' lightning blast, the Metacrisis process was actually two-way. And because of Davros's blast, it kind of reawoken the Doctor in her. So she is half Doctor as well. She's half Time Lord as well. And using the Doctor's mind, and also getting help with the two other Doctors, they process it so the Daleks are extremely weak now, and they send all the planets back to their orbit. However, the Metacrisis Doctor basically realizes it's like, right, this Dalek Empire is too big to be left alone. And so he plans, using the Crucible technology, to just blow up every Dalek in existence. This is another criticism that a lot of people have with this story. And I surprisingly don't have an issue with it. Basically, the complaint goes like this, it's way too easy, with all of this build-up, all of this climax, how deadly the Daleks have been. What? Donna can now press a few buttons and the Daleks' suits are all being controlled by her, being spinning around and made completely useless, only then to be easily destroyed. And I do understand that argument, and that is a very good issue against this story. However, thematically, I think it works, because throughout the first 4 series of the revived series, the main narrative, the main character development of the Doctor, shall we say, is that he starts off as a bit of a loner. He's just come from the Time War, and he basically is travelling alone because he can't go home. He's got nowhere to go. And throughout the series, we basically connects with people, reconnects with Sarah Jane, and makes friends like Rose, Martha, and Donna. And we start off the first series, with the Doctor struggling to defeat the Daleks, essentially on his own, with Rose Tyler being the one that destroys everything, but basically gaining the power of a god. But here we have the entire family of the revived series of Doctor Who at this point, all culminating together to just easily wipe the asses of the Daleks. The Doctor is not strong on his own. He is nothing on his own. But with his friends, with the people he meets along the way, he is mighty. And that is some really great theming right there. That all culminated to this fantastic piece with the music blaring and just over blast of joy, where the TARDIS is now being travelled by 6 people, as everybody from Sarah Jane, from Torchwood, from the main series are all in the TARDIS, controlling the panels to anchor the Earth back into its original orbit. And that music, that editing, that scene is just so great. I love it. Absolutely love it. And the Doctor sends everybody home. I won't be able to talk. I won't talk about all of them because there's just way too much happening, and this video is long enough as it is. But then we get to the Doctor and Donna back in the TARDIS by their own again, with Donna now having this new Time Lord mind, and she's spouting about all these amazing things. But the Doctor's just looking at her extremely sad. And then Donna starts doing all this technobabble and stuff. And then she starts repeating the same phases, like that. And we slowly realise that something isn't right. And Donna also realises that something isn't right. That a human with a Time Lord mind is something that's not supposed to happen. And the only cure is that if the Doctor makes Donna completely forget his entire existence. Now, the story teases up throughout the entire adventure that there's going to be this death. Dalek Khan mentions this prophecy that one of the children of time will die. One will still die. But in a sense, it's worse than that. Donna has now has the opportunity of being a much greater, better person, thanks to her experiences with the Doctor, be ripped out of her. It's no longer an option for her. She has to revert back to the normal temp person that she was. And that is just extremely sad. I mean, you saw at the start of part 1 of this video, I was in tears. And that is one of the saddest moments is when Wilfred gets a knock on the door, and Wilfred comes up and he's like, "Come on, Donna, Donna!" And he opens the door and he looks down and he sees the Doctor cradling Donna. And Bernard Crimmins' voice, when his voice starts breaking as he sees Donna's just unconscious, clearly been through something. Brilliant, phenomenal acting. And David Tennant's like, the Doctor's like, she can never remember me. She cannot remember how she is, and she's got to now continue her life as just an average, normal individual. And I love the scene in which Sylvia is like, she's such an amazing person. She's so much better than just a normal human being. And just before Donna walks in the room to complain about something, the Doctor has this little nudge, a little dig at Sylvia where he's like, well, maybe sometimes you should tell her that on occasion. And he kind of like reels in. That little dig is phenomenal. And the final scene of this story is the Doctor outside in the rain as Wilfred's like in his house, and Wilfred is basically telling the Doctor that he forgives him for what happens to Donna, and although I can't tell Donna, and I know that you're now alone, when I look up in the sky, when I look up in the stars, I will think of you, and I will pray for you. And the Doctor's just like, thank you, you are a great friend to me. And so the story is all about the family of the Doctor, the people that the Doctor has met and have complimented and have helped him and become this amazing superhero in a sense. And at the end of the story, he's being back as a loner. And that's the end of The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. Overall, it does have its issues, it does have its faults, I will admit that. There's a lot of plot holes in the narrative, especially in Journey's End. The story is rather rushed, with a lot of characters being sidelined and others seeming to be just more plot convenience for other characters. However, I think rewatching this, I've actually changed my opinions a lot throughout the years of me slowly starting to like pick away through the story, and rewatching it for this marathon, I had a hell of a time. It is entertaining as hell. Like I said in my last video, it is essentially Doctor Who does Infinity War and Endgame years before those films. In fact, the story came out in 2008, I believe. That is 10 years precisely before Infinity War, if I remember correctly. I'll have to check that, but yeah, it is event television, and it's entertaining as hell. It's epic. It's phenomenally directed. Graham Harper's easily his best work by far. Like, I don't even think it's a question. It is a fact that Graham Harper is at his best here. I'm so glad he got this almost movie look. It reminds me a lot of Empire Strikes Back in terms of its visual style, and you know, it's just an absolute blast. However, I will state that a majority of the fun of this story is that you've watched previous adventures all building up to this and knowing these characters and knowing these environments for this particular story. And so, on that note, Stolen Earth, Journey's End, absolutely phenomenal. It is easily, maybe not one of my favourites, but one story which I think I've had the most fun in Doctor Who. And so, I can't hate it. I know, it has a lot of plot issues, it has a lot of plot holes, but I like it nonetheless. So anyway, that's the Stolen Earth and Journey's End. So join me next time when Sarah Jane and the crew from Barnum Road have to say hello to a villain which Sarah Jane has met the race before. So join me next time for The Last Sontaran. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!